Phil Phails. Whoa, Phil Phails. Welcome to Phil Phails. My name is Philip Jones, and today I'm joined by Nova Martin, poet, druidess, trans and queer rights activist, and philanthropist. You can wave to everybody, Nova.
Hey there, folks. It's good to be here. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. Today, Phil Phails at courage and authenticity.
Yeah, I have a lot to say on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. However, I may help you with that.
Yeah. And yeah, I'm excited about it. There's a kind of a folks might not know you yourself are transsexual. Is that right?
Yep.
There's a way I want to I don't know anybody that's transsexual. I haven't hung out with anybody that was transsexual, and I have a fear that I might say something wrong or
Yeah. Well, I'll help you a little bit. I actually do use the term transsexual, and I can talk about specifically why I do. Most people nowadays say transgender. Transgender is generally more politically correct, and there's views within the trans community, sometimes we shorten it to trans, on why we don't use transsexual, because certain parts of the population use it to kind of demonize us. I actually have reclaimed it on purpose, but
I already did it, is what you're saying.
yeah, but it's you're fine.
Transgender.
Transgender is the more common one, but like I said, I actually say I'm a transsexual woman, or I say I'm a transgender woman, trans woman. But the reason why I use transsexual is because for me, my experience, my manifestation and expression of who I am, bringing out my authenticity, I believe is embedded within me biologically, that it is an issue of what we call so far biological sex, and that I actually had physical traits within my body, within my mind, that are what we would call female. And so therefore it's an issue of biological sex. Therefore I say transsexual.
Yeah.
That's why I like to use it, because it more resonates with my experience. And then also on purpose, I use it because it sounds threatening to more, conservative type of folks who are scared about it. It's like I'm a transsexual.
You want to be provocative.
Yeah, throw a little kind of, there's a little whip,
something,
a little whip on it when you
spice on it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna turn this on Do Not Disturb. Boop. Man, you're a rabble rouser, Nova.
I am a provocateur.
Provocateur.
It's a bit of me. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, we need provocativeness. I think that viewers want to see provocative stuff. They want to see.
I mean, I think it's great for television.
Controversial.
For content, it's great. Yeah, it's not always great in community spaces sometimes or whatnot, but.
Yeah, so if y'all tuned in to see a provocative discussion about transgender, where a cis white man makes a bunch of mistakes with language, and a kind transsexual and transgender woman holds him harmless, or maybe we should just have you just come down on me hard. That might be.
No, I mean, I don't believe in doing that, really.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you said something grossly offensive, which I don't think you will. So.
No, I'm. If I do it, it's like I'll be oblivious to it.
That's what
I'll stumble into it like a bear into a bear trap.
That's what I imagine, and
I got you.
Yeah, no, I'll help you out.
Yeah. All right, so we're gonna ask Phil Phails 5 questions, and these are about courage and authenticity. Are you ready?
I am.
That's not the first question.
Oh, dang it! I thought I was gonna get an easy one.
It's a pre-question.
See, I was gonna try and just get it taken.
Yeah, I was like, we're done. It's 5. The first question is, how would one fail at courage and authenticity?
How would one fail at courage and authenticity? I would start with authenticity. I'd be more gentle on when we talk about courage. Authenticity, I think one fails at. A lot of it sits around kind of concealing, hiding, being somewhat aware, but not listening to it or not following it, and then not taking those steps. And that is the courage part. And I would be really, I don't know, I'm pausing a little bit because I'm really reflective on failure with courage. Because I almost view that anytime you put any amount of courage into something, it's a success. Now there's there's really just grab life, I'm not gonna use that metaphor, but just grab it and take it and run with it. Like really big energy, let's do it.
Grab it by the bull's horns
The
or by the
bullhorns, yeah.
balls?
By the balls is
Because
what I
were
was
you
gonna
going to say
say.
balls?
I don't know what I can say or
We show this
okay.
after 10.
Okay,
So
yeah.
you can say grab him by the balls.
Grab it by the balls.
Yeah.
There's
I don't want you to curtail your language.
Okay.
If you want to cuss, I want you to cuss.
Okay.
I just want
I
you to
didn't
be
know.
full you.
Okay, that sounds great.
This does air on Austin Public Access, also on YouTube. And I think it's more important to have
Just authentic, yeah. I'm quite a sailor. I have a sailor mouth, so
yeah,
I'll try not to.
Sailor's mouth, yeah.
Yeah, I think with courage, you're talking about failure with courage. There's big courage, and then there's just little eeks of courage, and I think all the above are great.
Mm-hmm.
So, how would one fail at courage? I really have to ponder that because, I mean, maybe an extreme would be like somebody who's braggadocious about their courage, because then it becomes something else, right?
Prideful or
Yeah.
not humble.
Right. Yeah. And then just, I guess, the base level failure is just never activating it, never trusting that you can do it. And most human beings, I don't think, have that, but there are some. There are some who have had really traumatic lives and, really struggle to take any kind of step. So, but again, the kind person in me would be, I would pause at calling that a failure because sometimes there's conditions beyond one own individual that that produces quote unquote failure in conditions, right? So that's those, of course, my views.
Yeah. So with authenticity, it's somehow ignoring an inner intuition. It's like there's this inner thing that says you are this way, and you just ignore it or turn down the volume of that and prioritize fitting in or prioritize.
Yep, that's right. Oftentimes, you do what you think you should do, or what society thinks you should do, or what your family thinks you should do, or you mask. You take on something else, but you really wanted to do, this. Like maybe it's with a career, maybe it's loving someone, loving a certain type of person. Yeah.
And with courage, it seems like it might be hard to fail as long as you can't live without exerting some amount of courage. So any amount is a success.
That's in my view.
Yeah. What are the kind of the little learning levels along the way? What are the learning experiences along the way of courage and authenticity?
I think it's listening. I think it starts with like listening, which is a form of like awareness. Um, then there's a bit of reflection on that, what you've heard, what you feel, what you sense. Then then you can go to like acting on, or you can go to like hypothetically acting on, kind of like a thought exercise, doing envisioning, and then perhaps acting on. And as you act on bringing like authenticity forward, then it becomes like a sculpture. When you first when you first do anything, you you bumble about it. You're just taking shots. And sometimes people get a high off that first engagement, like, oh, I've done it, I finally did it. But I can reflect on my own experience of coming out and transitioning. Initially there was this great joy, and there still is. There's still quite a bit of joy. But then the world starts to give you feedback. People say things, Initially, people in my life were very kind and pretty supportive. I was very fortunate for that. It's not the experience for many trans people. And I'm from Denton, Texas, and North Texas, and it's very supporting and loving and open-minded community generally.
Yeah, we had when we were going to school there. So Nova and I went to school together.
Mm-hmm.
When we went to school together, Nova, I didn't know you as Nova. I knew you by another name
Mm-hmm.
and by another gender.
That's right. Yep.
But I think when we went to school there, wasn't there a trans man that was running for mayor?
I I should know that, but I don't. So that's I have no idea.
Okay.
But uh, I'll look that up now. I'm really curious about that.
And tell me what you find,
Yeah.
because this might,
Oh, I could probably text someone and get an
I
answer,
remember
but
there was this trans human.
mm-hmm.
I don't know if he went by him or her, but that
Mm-hmm.
was running for mayor, and it's just a distant memory. Anyway,
Yeah.
okay, say
Yeah.
more.
So the the next wave of authenticity after you've kind of taken some action is you're going to get like some either you're going to have self-reflection, you're going to get some feedback.
Hmm.
And then the big key is grace, giving oneself grace, or we could call it compassion. And then another level to that is giving others grace, because as you're trying to become more and more authentic, people are going to have their opinions about you, their feedback. And sometimes it's going to hurt. That we could be talking about a skill, we could be talking about changing one's style, we could be
Hmm.
talking about changing one's gender. People are going to have opinions, and you have to learn to take some things in stride. You have to, and you might consider certain things because of what others say. You might say, "Oh, I failed at this," or "I'm failing at this," but you have to learn to say, "But that's okay.
Hmm.
I've taken 3 steps. I want to go 5 more steps." And so, giving oneself grace, and then I believe in giving others grace, because otherwise, if you don't, you're going to end up being people can end up being bitter or aggravated or angry and hateful. And I've certainly held all those feelings at times, but there's times when you have to say, I'm going to let these go so I can more, from in my view, more fully shine,
Yeah.
and be more holistic as in my authenticity. Um, so that ability to give grace, and then to keep going, to take more and more steps, more exploration, to be open to, who I thought I was or who I would be at the start of my transition is not who I am now. And even who I thought I would be 6 months ago is not necessarily who I am now, in both good and bad ways, in ways that I'm proud of and in ways that I've failed at, you know? And but I will talk about specifically authenticity with with transitioning a gender. When I, I've mentored a fair amount of other trans folks. And I do, you hear me a lot talk about grace.
Hmm.
Grace is like a gentleness that goes within authenticity, and it pairs great with courage too. So, yeah, I think those are a lot of the kind of the levels or the phases, if you will, of authenticity. I think the last thing I'd say is that I don't believe we're ever quite done, and I don't really believe we're really meant to be done.
Right.
So there's no the in my head, the universe is circular, and it's not necessarily you're not going to like a peak
Yeah. There's no
it's
finished product.
there's a kind of a eternal pulse, to the an ebb and flow,
Hmm.
and so
What I heard was of the lessons along the way of
hmm
courage and authenticity was it begins with listening and awareness, listening to like your inner guidance or your
hmm
inner intuition, your inner knowing, and then was reflecting on that, like spending some time with that voice,
hmm
maybe turning up the volume of it, and like having those inner dialogues.
hmm
Then action, and that action could be visualization. It doesn't have to be, oh, now I'm out there in the world this way. It could be like, what would my life be like
hmm
in the world that way?
yeah.
And then you said sculpture, which it was like, I thought of it as, this imperfect way of realizing that visualization. It's not going to be perfect. You're not going to come out there day one and be, you know, a virtuoso pianist
hmm
or whatever it is. You're going to step out there and you're going to craft this way
Hmm.
or this expression. So there's a little bit of artistry to it. Sculptor's an
Yeah.
artist,
Yeah.
and
And
you're
I think I said a little bit like also exploration, you
yeah,
know, that that makes your sculpture or your authenticity more multidimensional, you know?
yeah. And then it was self-reflection. So you kind of cycle back on yourself.
Hmm.
You're back. Hey, what was that sculpture? What was that exploration like? And through that, you're gonna get some feedback, inner feedback and external feedback.
Hmm.
And you mentioned self-grace or self-compassion, and then
Hmm.
I think you were speaking to some you were speaking towards giving others grace, giving others compassion. And I think what you meant or what I took from that
Hmm.
was the people that give you feedback that you don't really like, or that's I don't want to
Yeah.
call it negative. It's like
Or
that's
that's
their
it's
thing.
hard. Sometimes you get feedback that you don't like that's hurtful.
Right.
Sometimes you get feedback you don't like that you're able to still say, "Well, I think it's truthful." I don't like it, but I think they might be right. And sometimes you get feedback that you deduce is just like, "Oh, I think that person's either just mindless, or I actually think that person did this intentionally in a hurtful way." Right,
Yeah.
and you have to figure out how to allocate those things, and, sometimes it takes weeks, it takes months, it takes years to allocate some of that
Yeah.
with people.
The first one is loving what is. Someone says, "Well, this is how I see it." And you say, "Well, I kind of see it too, but I don't really want to see it that way.
Mhm,
I don't know how to love that
mhm.
truth or that shared awareness
Yeah,
that you're given." And the other one is maybe it's more about them, but it's not necessarily negative. Like they're not trying to be
mhm.
mean and they're giving it,
Yeah,
and it's still more about them than about some shared awareness or
yeah,
some shared truth. And the third one is just kind of trolls,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
People that are just trying to stir up and be mean to folks.
Yeah, yeah, and also, I think people who might be close to you, sometimes it's a power thing. People will s sometimes people say I mean, the cliche is we hurt the people who are the closest to us,
Mhm.
and people who are close to you, they know you really well. They know your history, they know your vulnerabilities, and maybe they'll say something just to maybe they're jealous about something, about you. So they'll say, "Oh, you really think you're hot stuff, don't you?" or y- and you know, for me, I'm like, oh, do I? Do I, and then start worrying, do I come across as if I just think I'm the biggest biggest cheese on the planet?
You swing the biggest swinging dick around town. Is that what you're going
No, I love butchering. I love butchering cliches, so I just made that one up. But yeah, the biggest piece of cheese on the plate.
with? Yeah. I like a big piece of cheese.
Yeah. So yeah, you know, um, it's interesting kind of sifting through negative feedback because I tell you, with being a woman who has transitioned, a lot of people have views on it. A lot of people have feedback.
Yeah.
My mom has said things to me that had no idea really. She had. No clue what the impact was.
For what she said.
Yeah, yeah. Other A lot of cisgender women who are born assigned female at birth, have said things to me that they didn't really appreciate what they said, and whatnot. I've even had other trans women say things to me that I was like, what? Excuse me? Um, so, but we're kind of focusing on this, but it's important because going back to authenticity and courage, because if you were to listen to and hone in on that feedback or those opinions, you might decide, I'm not going to take any more
Yeah, I'm
steps.
gonna shut the door on that.
Yeah.
The world said no, no, thank you to
And then
that, and I'm gonna run
and
away
when you're feeling that, that's when you have to say, you know what? I'm going to keep going.
and give yourself grace
Give
and
yourself
compassion,
grace.
and give those people grace and compassion.
Yep. Yep.
One, so
Because
you're not
otherwise
bitter
you'll end up focusing on that stuff.
on them and not yourself and your own journey, your own growth.
Yeah.
Man, it can be hard, I imagine. It can be hard to trust yourself and keep going in the face of negative feedback or like mean-spirited stuff
Yeah.
or and there's that Morrissey song, or is it a Smith song? We hate it when our friends become successful.
Uh-huh.
You know that song?
I don't know. I grew up listening to the Smiths, and a lot early Morrissey. So yeah,
And I imagine some folks resent when people live their authentic self because they're still in a cage.
yeah,
And then it threatens that. Oh, I can't do that. Then they're met with a lot of,
yeah,
oh, that means I should do that. I'm not going to do that.
yeah. Well, I've been reflecting on some of what you're talking about here a lot lately. Um, so I identify. I'm kind of in the middle of like modifying it, but I identify as like a gay woman, as we would call lesbian.
Hmm.
But what I found in my experience that a lot of a fair amount of lesbians, while they might be kind and supportive to transgender women, they're not going to date trans women. And the elephant in the room oftentimes has to do with the genitals. They're like, well, we're not quite into that, that stuff. And that's,
The penis versus the
yeah,
vagina.
yeah, yeah. And that's cool. That's cool. I mean, I generally like the, like the vagina, but, um, I like, I have a whole poem about, it's called Penis Pussy, and it's about trans women's penises, how they're like a special version of penis.
Oh my
But
God.
but
So good.
anyhow, it's actually a really great poem. But where was I going with that? Oh, so I've had to kind of face up to that, like a fair amount of gay women kind of I'm just blank to them. I'm not an option, you
Hmm.
know. And that has been like a hard truth. And I've, likely comes down to like genital preference, but then I think some other of them are kind of pissed off, like that I have a certain, like, I don't know, liberation in in my expression of womanhood,
Hmm.
um, and vice versa, to have compassion. And I'm not talking about all people here. I hope this doesn't come across as a broad generalization, but have compassion for that, like, women, whether they're gay women or not, cisgender women have to deal with tons of bullshit by society. Their lives from the moment they're born, they're being served these expectations of gender.
Hmm.
And I gradually, as a trans woman, I gradually see that and learn that myself. But there's certain things that I reach for, that are, it is a liberation for me to express myself in a what we call feminine way or hyper feminine way. But for some women, that's they don't want that, and they're tired of it, and they have every right. It's not for me to decide. They have every right to feel that way. Um, but I'm trying to go back to the reason why I opened this door. But
We were talking
I
about,
I've had to deal with like some comments, and being treated kind of invisible and whatnot.
I would think,
Um,
I would think lesbian women would be attracted to other women, like female, masculine, female. They would
and
be
and
attracted to a
and
female energy,
and they,
not necessarily the
yeah,
equipment.
right. Well, I mean,
Because theoretically, they would use dildos and stuff. Like,
sure, and they
I
and they
mean, I've
are,
watched some of their movies.
yeah, yeah, and they are, and I think a good point here. Just I always say this about trans women and like lesbians. It's like there's a spectrum of lesbians.
Oh yeah.
There's a spectrum of like trans women, and so it's just in my experience that I've had to encounter feedback and opinions sometimes, and exclusion and judgment. I bring this up because it's the area that I'm attracted to.
Yeah.
But then it's like it's been a weird experience, to identify with that and be like, oh, I've gotten a fair amount of kind of like a little bit of weirdness and exclusion and yada yada. And the point that I really want to step back to is I have to learn to go, okay, which is a weird thing. Not like just a complete passive okay, but okay, this happens.
Mm-hmm.
Early on, I used to, and I still do sometimes. It came, I think, come across as like, woe me, and I've gotten to a point lately where I'm like, there's just I'm not gonna be people's, cup of tea.
Yeah.
And that's fine with them and it's fine with me.
Yeah.
And that's hard to do. That's hard. It was hard to get to that point. But it's still it's important for me because then I say, well, I'm still valid, even if I'm one out of 300, you know, lesbians preference. If that, I'm still valid and being proud. I'm proud for them. I'm proud. I have lots of lesbian pride for all the different manifestations of it.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna, because maybe I might not find the most acceptance within there. I'm not gonna get bitter about it. There's a reason why I'm proud of, like, why I believe in, like, woman to woman love.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very much like, we talk about being a provocateur. I don't believe in the patriarchy and the default setting for the way our society has been for thousands of years. Um, and so I believe that woman to woman love is a very empowering, a very safe way to be for anyone who identifies as woman. But those are my philosophical beliefs, right? I'm not saying that I'm not gonna go and can't enforce that on the world. And of
Right.
course, that's an absurd idea. But yeah, so I still have, lots of pride, even though there's some occasionally disconnect, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it's important to still, I think in this age, it's important to still figure out ways that we can stay connected, even when our connection is not perfect. Because we have this culture of like people, canceling other people if they don't use the right
Well,
words,
we
or
have
they,
echo chambers.
yeah, you have that as well.
I think
Yeah.
it's really important that and part of this for me is like getting alternative points of view and perspectives, folks that live a totally different life than me, so I can
Hmm.
learn and grow.
Yeah.
It'd be like me getting a Republican or Trump supporter on here, which I would be totally open to. If
Sure.
there's a
Yeah.
Trump supporter out there, I mean, I'm not personally one, but I would talk to them, and I want my existence, my frame of reference to be influenced by a lot of different viewpoints, a
Hmm.
lot of different perspectives.
Yeah. And there's value in it. In some of my like activism for trans rights, an angle I've taken is to actually connect with conservative politicians. There's still more work I want to do with that. But oftentimes conservative politicians don't even know trans people, which is scary because they're writing legislation to
Well,
that.
Nova, I'm pretty liberal and I don't know trans people.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I'm
So,
not Republican, I'm not conservative,
yeah.
and I don't.
Yeah. But I think it's important. I think it's powerful, and I think it takes courage to say, I'm going to go and talk to this quote unquote adversary,
Or someone that's
you know,
just so different
somebody
from
who's,
me.
yeah. And there's lots of benefit for oneself, for the other person, for
Mm-hmm.
society in general,
Mm-hmm.
for having those conversations. I remember being in the Texas Capitol, going to speak with, I think it's Senator Bob Hall, um, who is a pretty conservative judge, senator, Texas state senator, from East Texas area. I can't remember the exact district, but had written a bill, and not in the most recent legislative session in 2023, and it was a roundabout way to, through like insurance kind of mandates, to basically ban hormones for all trans Texans. Now the bill didn't pass, thankfully,
Mm-hmm.
but I was real concerned about it. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to figure out who the author of this bill is. I'm going to go talk to him, you know? And I remember being in the Texas Capitol, and it was on a day there was lots of activity, thankfully, by lots of activists in the Texas Capitol last summer. And so there were other people there, and they're like, "What are you up to? Are you here for this? Da da da." I was like, "Actually, I'm gonna go talk to," yeah. And they looked at me like, "What? Like, what are you doing? Why would you do that? Why would you go talk to this horrible person?" And I was like, "Because they need to be talked to."
Yeah.
They
We
and
need to talk to people.
yeah, yeah. And that conversation actually went went really well.
You talked to him.
Yeah, yeah. I went through his, like, just sent an email through his staff, and I had like a whole scheduled appointment, and it was in the Texas Capitol.
Yeah.
Um, Went into his office and had initially had 15 minutes. That's what I asked for. We talked for almost an hour, and it was a great conversation. Now,
Yeah.
just to, I'm not gonna talk about all the, everything that was covered, but there was and I kept it in my head, I kept it in my head, keep a tone of respect, because that's important to me. It's important
To build rapport.
to build rapport, and I I charmed them with my Texas, my little Texas, cutie character, but and brought out some of my mom's, like, East Texas. My mom's from Texarkana, and played some of that up. And I knew what I was doing, but had an educative, educational, type of conversation with he and like two of his staffers.
I imagine that's not what folks do anymore very often. That this generation, my grandmother, she would write
Hmm.
her senators and her Congress people. She would write them letters and she would call them and
I,
she would leave
I,
messages and
lots of
talk to them.
Yeah, lots of people do that. Lots of people do. They really do. Um, on all there was over like 400, 500 pieces of anti-trans legislation um, last in 2023, and there were mounds of emails, mounds of recorded phone conversations. I'm talking, tens of thousands.
Wow.
So people do, they absolutely do. Now, whether they go and, think I'm going to try and talk to him, I'm not quite sure, but that was, as all this stuff was happening in April and May of last year of 23, I was becoming overwhelmed by it. Every single day, a friend would send me an article or
Mm-hmm.
whatnot we'd see, and I worked in UX design and tech. I worked for a well-known travel company, and I led their design, a part of their design department. Had a leadership position, had to be responsible for 10, 15 people, designers, and make sure, just help them out, make sure that they have what they need. And all this legislation was disrupting my ability to function.
Yeah, you were focused on that.
Yeah. There was one day I just literally spent the entire day crying
Yeah.
in between getting on video calls for my work. And I went to my supervisor and I said, "Hey, I think I'm gonna need some time off."
Yeah.
And so I started exploring like some actions and activism, and I knew that people were coming down here, and I'm glad and thankful that they did, because they have had an impact, and they're continuing to do it, and I think we absolutely have to do that here in Texas. Um, but I decided for myself, and I will, and I've done that a little bit in terms of being a part of like the group or the crowds that show up and they swarm the Capitol, and I think it's awesome, and they chant and they drop banners and stuff. I think it's really badass. Um, but I thought for myself, I wanted to do something a little different, because a key of part of who I am are like relationships
Mm-hmm.
and conversations. And that's where I got this idea. I'm like, okay, I'm going to track down this senator who had this bill that I was really worried about, and I'm going to go talk to him, and I called a couple other ones and spoke to their staff and gave them my views and my concerns and whatnot. And
It's harder to ignore a human being sitting across the table from you talking to you for 15 minutes
uh-huh.
that turns
It-
into an hour
right.
than it is an email or a voicemail
That's right.
that's
And
perhaps
it's like,
contentious.
you're looking me in the eyes.
Yeah. And there's a meeting of the minds.
Mhm.
There's a
And, like,
there's a relationship building.
And they did say something to me at some point. They're like, "Well, Nova, we just had such a great time, chatting with you," and then they said something like, "Well, you're not like, all the rest of them."
The rest of them.
And actually, that was probably the moment where I had to do the most management, because I go, um, well, they're like, and I kind of stayed, I'd let them kind of keep feeding me what they're trying to get at. And they're like, well, they're just real angry, da da da, da, and da, da. And I'm like, and I go, well, your entire party, it's on the Texas Republican platform, and they're continuing on with it. I just saw the new platform that came out. It was something like to curb the influence of transgender people in Texas society, or or something like that. That was in the previous platform that I think was from like 22 or 21. And I said, I said, your party has specifically stated and brought our whole class of people, which is actually mathematically a very small section of Texas society. You're saying we're gonna go after this little bitty small group of people as a platform. And I said, that's why all those people are pissed off. That's why they're angry. That's why they don't have any like decorum with you, right?
Yeah.
And and I said, so that's, I go, yeah, I may be different, but I wanted to have a civil conversation with you all, but those people are pissed off because you're targeting us, right?
And
And
you
then,
think they're targeting, I play devil's advocate, or just
hmm
they are scared of their way of life being threatened by influence.
I think on the surface, um, that's what they talk about. I think it's really about, on the politician level, they grab, whether it's, trans rights, or, abortion,
Mm-hmm.
whatnot. Uh, they grab these things because the Republican Party is in such a dire straits due to the diversity of the United States, and Texas is becoming a very diverse. We are already a diverse population. That diversity does not play well with the values of the Republican Party, the classical values of the Republican Party. Instead of investing in reforming their party, they have been spending time making sure that they pick topics that get the most rabid elements of their party to show up
To stoke
at the polls.
their
Yeah,
base.
that's right.
And that fear.
Not even their base, to stoke the fringes,
The
the
extremes.
extremists,
Yeah.
because it's that 5 to 10% is what keeps their party alive this in this world of diversity.
Yeah.
And so, now this is, there's I'm sure there's probably lots more to it, but that's why I think they have the politicians and the parties and picked on their platform. That's why they're coming after trans people. Now, do some of them deeply, truly hate trans people? Hate/disagree, which are separate, but certainly, certainly.
You got to
But
know somebody
but
to
I
hate
got
them, though. They hate the idea of something.
but I got the feeling and they could have just been, talking again. I always butcher cliches, talking through their teeth or whatnot. But they could have just been playing nice. But I got the sense that they actually respected me, right? And if that individual who I met with, um, truly had a deep animosity for trans people, it didn't come across that way. So who knows? Who knows? But
I think you hate ideas, though. It's harder to hate people.
I think
You meet a person, you get to know them.
yeah,
And
and that's why I think it's effective to have those, to go have a relationship type of relational activism.
back to our questions
Yeah.
about authenticity and courage. What do you think success looks like from courage and authenticity? What is a successful kind of cycle, like effortless moving towards more authenticity and more courage? What's that look like?
Sorry, the cycle to make it more effortless,
Well, yeah, I guess I think
to
of
become
success. I don't think success is a goal or like a place. It's not a location. I kind of think of success as like
so to
a
become
dog that's got
fluid.
the scent of something. So it's like wayfinding, like, oh,
hmm
I've got this iterative direction
hmm
towards success.
I think it's like, for example, if we use my transition as like a an explosion of authenticity, a nucleus of it.
Mm-hmm.
There have been so many other things that have come out. So I think it's continuing on with more and more and leaning into it and creating, because sometimes, we talk about authenticity, there's, I'm not sure if I'm right or wrong here, but there's often a main theme that's being held back in someone's life or someone's identity, or where a big pressure is sitting. It could be with career. It could be learning a new skill. It could be an athlete who's trying to switch to a different sport. Um, Once you get that movement on that like main theme, it produces, it takes courage, ironically, to do that, but it also produces more courage, I think. And so with like my transition, I started to find a multitude of things that I kind of knew when I looked back on my life, that I was like, yes, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. Not just about transitioning, you know, like, um, to, I mean, it could go with transition, but like talk about shame, like in sexuality and sexual expression. And, you know, that, well, if I can take the strides to, um, you know, go from being a male presenting person to a woman, um, then I'm going to be proud about that. I love sex. I like sex. I think sex is great. I think it's healthy to say that out loud, you know, and to be cognizant that when I say it, that like, you know, people demonize trans people. Oftentimes there's a trope and a cliche that trans people are sexual perverts and whatnot.
Mm.
And so that takes courage for me to say, you know what, I'm going to still say that I enjoy sex. I'm sex positive. I'm not going to have shame about it. I'm not going to let this like, this trope that exists in society make me shut my mouth, you know?
I doesn't everybody like sex?
I don't, I mean, I think so,
I
but
I mean,
but to feel liberated to like it though is different. You know, to like sex in a way where, you know, or to maybe like a certain kind of sex, you know? Maybe a
mhm.
complete hetero man actually likes anal sex, you
Yeah.
know? Likes and
To
and
be
to be able to
kink positive,
yeah,
to be accepting of all the different expressions of sexuality, including some that aren't common or aren't like
that
the norm.
don't fit yeah into the script. And so, you know, just, and I didn't have tons of shame necessarily, but I was like, oh, no, I discovered along with transitioning that I'm sex positive. I discovered that I had to redefine my actual sexuality. I was like, oh, as a woman, I'm really into women. Oh, I'm gay. Like, I didn't know that. I didn't know that real clearly. I didn't
Mhm.
see myself that way.
Yeah.
Um, you know, 10 years ago. Um, Ironically, I always hit it off. I really got on well with lesbians, you know, like when I was in my previous gender, I always had, you know, I had good friendships with lesbians, which is funny kind of looking back. But y- other thing is like hedonism, um, you know, not feel, and it shame is attached to that too, or just being like, it's like I enjoy partying. I really do. I truly do. I love connecting with people. I like being silly. I like being playful. I like dancing. I like having fun. I'm 47 years old and I party probably a lot more than most 47-year-olds.
Mhm.
And some people could look at me. I think my mom maybe sometimes thinks I'm kind of irresponsible, but I actually know how to party very responsibly and I know how to handle my stuff and I'm happy being somebody who enjoys partying and hedonism, you know?
Yeah.
I have a little bit and I wasn't like this. I didn't realize this. I have a little bit of like a raver girl like in me
Yeah.
that I get to enjoy. And otherwise, like going back to authenticity, somebody might have been my age and thought, you know, that's not real age appropriate. I, I probably need to manage that, you know? Or maybe,
What about when I was a kid, partying was sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
mm-hmm,
And a part of my life has been addiction has been a part of it.
mm-hmm,
And it's been using drugs and alcohol as a
uh-huh,
distraction.
mm-hmm,
And it's something that's probably gotten in the way of my authenticity.
yeah,
Drinking too much, smoking pot too much, all these things that I thought, well, I would use mental gymnastics to say, oh, these are helping me cope with my
mm-hmm,
neurodivergence, or these are things that, and not really seeing that they were dulling my
mm-hmm.
shine.
And I certainly I think they can, you know, absolutely think it can for some folks, and I think I've done that at times myself. I'm self-aware that sometimes I skirt between just enjoying a party and sometimes just coping, you know, masking something,
Yeah.
right? And so, Yeah, definitely. I think oftentimes these things can go one way within oneself, and also, a different way, a different way within oneself, and also then differently across other people.
Yeah.
You know.
When you partying is kind of like this big word, but when I break it down to its inner components,
Mm-hmm.
like there's not a lot wrong. You can see like dancing,
Mm-hmm.
that's great. Movement is medicine. I love ecstatic dance. I like
Mm-hmm.
social dancing, two-stepping, swing, all that stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
dancing's amazing. Tons of fun. I don't see what could be wrong with that. Music's awesome.
Yeah.
Like going and listening to music,
Yeah.
getting lost and captivated by a great performance or performers. That's art. Socializing, community, people
Mm-hmm.
together, celebrating,
Uh-huh.
like partying. When you really break it down, I think in growing up, for me, there was often this, like I said, sex, drugs, and rock and roll
Mm-hmm.
that gave it this more grimy or this more like bad kid
Right.
image.
Right. And if
And I don't think that has to be there.
that's right, and if partying is wholly oriented around, like, drugs, for example, then it's just lame. Then it's, I mean, in my opinion, don't want to make anyone feel guilty or shame for however they want to do it, but then it's just like, oh well, that's just all we're doing. We're just focused on getting high, and it's like, no, I don't want to just do that. I want to be entertained. I want to have great conversation. I want to learn about something. I want to learn some new insight on the people that I'm with. I want to laugh with people.
So it's
I
connection.
want to make them laugh. Yeah.
It's connection, it's relating, it's
Yeah.
also exploring music, exploring movement. All those things I don't see any wrong in.
No, I don't either. And sometimes you throw substances into that, and it tweaks our consciousness, or it alters it in a certain way. And sometimes that's like pulling, a curtain over us, and blinding us. In other ways, it's like opening like five more rooms in our head.
Kind of like how MDMA came to be through the lens of group therapy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. MDMA is fascinating. In terms of the way it works, in helping, not even talking about it as a party, drug, which is most people know it as, but therapeutically.
Well, that's what I was
Yeah.
saying. It came to be to use it in a therapeutic group therapy
Mhm.
setting, if I'm not mistaken. And that's where it began.
Well, it originally began as a diet drug in the early 1900s when it
Oh.
was developed, because they thought it structurally is a methamphetamine. I don't think it's proper exactly to call it a methamphetamine, but they thought that's what they were making,
Hmm.
something that would just give you energy.
Yeah.
And no, it certainly does. And that was how and why it was produced. But I'm trying to remember the time era, but I think it was in like the 70s that psychologists started understanding, and therapists started understanding the emotional
Yeah.
facilitative power of it, and developed, initially did therapy with it. And then it exploded into a dance drug in the 80s. And now they're coming back to it, for the use of therapy, because what it does is the amygdala in the brain kind of can govern a fair amount of our fear response. And I might be butchering this, so your viewers might be she's getting that completely wrong, but I believe it's in the amygdala. I'm using completely scientific words here.
Yeah.
It
Amygdala.
Yeah, it kind of chills out that response to that fear response, and so what it does is it helps release, like, retrain trauma, the
Because you
trauma,
can recontextualize the experience
because
in a
you're
safe environment
right,
where you're
because
not
your brain,
being
that area of your brain is not reacting or overreacting
as
to
you're
it.
going
So
through.
therefore,
Yeah.
talk about courage, actually, it kind of gives you a little bit of courage to reapproach, for example, a soldier who might have PTSD,
Hmm.
um, might not want to ever talk about memories of, in a war zone.
Yeah.
But
Traumatic experiences.
right, and keeps it bottled up. But on MDMA, they might be able to approach it and talk about it, right? And I think that's phenomenal. I think that's a really good and beautiful thing.
Yeah. I support any way we can start to work with, address traumatic experiences.
Hmm. Yeah.
I did a ketamine assisted psychotherapy because I've
I,
experienced
I've
a
done the
lot
same.
of,
I've done the same.
yeah, I was raised in a really traumatic, I had a really traumatic childhood, a lot of
Hmm.
abuse, a lot of neglect, a lot of just, it just was not good.
Yeah.
And so I've used a lot of different frameworks, a lot of different practices to reflect on that and to kind of restructure my brain. And ketamine assisted
Hmm.
psychotherapy was one of them.
Yeah.
And I've also stumbled into a lot of other psychedelic,
Hmm.
as a hobbyist,
Right. Right.
but also some very with a lot of intentionality, some of
Hmm.
them, and others with a lot of fun
Just
and
yeah.
excitement and recreational exuberance.
Yep. Yep. Yeah.
Um,
And same. I've done very mindful and done very mindless.
yeah,
Use and exploration of psychedelics. Yeah.
yeah. Question 4: What do you? What has been the benefits for you of stepping into a more authentic expression, a more courageous lifestyle?
I mean, I'm not sure where to start and where to end on that question. Um, my life is much more full. I feel like I was a pretty good, decent person before, and I had friends, a decent amount of friends, but I have many fold more friends now. Like hundreds and hundreds of friends, and it's not. I'm not trying to say that like it's some. I'm not in some competition to gather friends or anything,
Mm-hmm.
but just that, like, really what that's about is my ability to connect. When people see that you're like just out there, just like showing yourself, being yourself, people want to come talk to you, or you end up inspiring people. And or people to see that you're buzzing. I will have people like come up to me sometimes. I'll just be hanging out, just have walked into a bar having a drink by myself or something, and or be in a store or something, and people will say that I have like a shine in my eye or something. Like, I've had people tell me that it looks like you have jewels in your eyes.
You have
Like
what?
jewels in my eyes.
Jewels, you know.
Because there's like, just I don't know, it's like, because I'm happy that I said, you know what, I'm tired of this bullshit living a certain way. I'm gonna live my real self. So I know, like, many more people, I'm life is more connective. I always say about my transition is that I went from living in black and white to like Technicolor, you know? Um, so I think that so many more connections, so much more, like I said, or touched on earlier, w- you know, one transition, a gender transition, then there's other transitions. It's like I delved even more into my poetry. My poetry became, I like, up to the point that I'd transitioned, I'd probably written about 5,000 poems in my life. At this point, in the past like 2 or 3 years, I've added 5,000 more poems. Like, I don't stop. I can't stop, and I won't stop. No, sorry. But like, I wrote tons of poetry before. I write even more now. And it's even weirder. It's even fun. It's even like, and some of the stuff I wrote really early on was really like fun, weird stuff. But it's the poetry even has like more dimension to it. Um, and then everything else that I get to do now as like this new expression. Like, I played soccer before. I love soccer. I'm continuing to play it. And it is a brilliant joy to play soccer as a woman with women. I love playing, like, women play, and I suspected this, but like, women play more collective than men do. And I used to I played on and I managed men's teams. And I used to get frustrated with them for being like, sometimes being so like, one guy just wanting the ball and getting it, and not wanting to pass it. And that doesn't happen as much with women. Women kind of tend to like, you have the ball for so long and then you get rid of it. And that's the way I like to play
Maybe
soccer.
they're more social
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
the way they play.
Perhaps. Yeah. I mean, yeah. And I don't know if that's, something that's inherent, if it's an estrogen thing, if it's a cultural thing, who knows? But so, like, that is even a new founded joy of something that existed previously. So, um, authenticity, manifest authenticity. I think that would be, I went on a long ramble, but I think that's the way.
Authenticity manifests authenticity.
It does.
Some more gets more, gets
Mm-hmm.
more. So there's
Yeah,
a snowball effect.
that's right. I believe that. That's what's happened. At least that's what's happened with myself. And I've seen it with other trans people. We call it trans joy. That once you're out being authentic, people will then suddenly, I'm making this up, but like someone will be like, you know what, I'm going to start baking now too. I've always wanted to be a baker, or someone will be like, I'm going to launch my own business now. I always want, after they transition. Because transition, oftentimes before transition, it's a way people are living life in a muted way. And then once you feel more as your authentic self in regards to your gender, then those other ways that you want to be authentic or that you've longed for or loved, you start to listen to too. So it authenticity manifests authenticity. Authenticity begets authenticity.
Yeah.
So
What would you say to someone that was, you know, needing courage or had some transformation that was at the tip of their tongue, but they didn't know how to find it or didn't know how to have that courage? Or how would you mentor them?
yeah, the first thing that came to my mind, I don't know if it's actually what I would say to them. I'd have to think on it.
Mm-hmm.
It's about how precious life is, and that before you know it, your life won't be here.
Yeah.
At least in the form that we know it.
We're all going to die.
You're gonna die, which is a beautiful thing.
And we don't know when.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing that's built into the
Impermanence.
to all animals and beings, right?
Yeah. And
Now, what
plants,
happens?
yeah.
Yeah, what happens is a separate conversation, But what you hold in your hands, what you hold in your body, it's gonna be gone. And I don't know if I would start there, but it's you have to spend some time, I think, with that truth when you're sitting on something that you're scared of or that that's
Impermanence.
yeah.
Death. This how sacred
Mm-hmm.
and how
Sacred, precious, and
this time we have.
and it it goes quick.
Yeah.
And the older you get, it goes quicker, right?
Yeah.
So I would spend some area in talking about that because you basically then I feel like what you have to do is you have to get someone to go, okay, I don't know if I can take these steps, but oh crap, everything's gonna be gone. Is it important to me never to take a step? Is that more important, never to take a step, than to sit around and watch everything vanish? You know? I would probably engage in some manner like that. I'm trying to think on another approach, I mean, I think sometimes with courage, or if we're talking about like something about fear, you oftentimes will have to explore trauma with someone.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, not that I'm necessarily certified, for being the best to do that on any given topic with any given human being, but you will have sometimes you might have to spend space with someone or hold silence, hold space with them as they reveal where their hesitation, why their fear is coming from. So you have to, as a mentor, you have to have that calmness and that humility to listen to, and to listen in a way that doesn't cast consternation, that doesn't cast, parental kind of type of, you know, judgment onto
Some
someone.
radical acceptance,
Yep,
some unconditional positive regard.
yep, yep. So, and I have found I have a lot of people who open up to me. I don't know if it's because they say, people they get to know me, they know I'm trans, but people will spill their hearts to me, and that is always like a very sacred thing
Mm.
with me. When someone is sharing like, and oftentimes it is people who have some spectrum of trans, within them, and they want to express it. And they might be talking about a life experience of, you know, why they've held it back or what they're scared of, you know.
Yeah.
Um, but I think it's very sacred when people are sharing a hesitation with you or a pain or a trauma. So I think that's something. I don't necessarily think it's about, what to say, but it's about what to hold, how to hold.
How to hold space.
Yeah. Yeah. Trying to think of what else on that question, but
That's perfect.
yep.
That's all 5.
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
Oh,
5
okay.
questions.